Welcome to the Node Foundation TSC meeting for the 6th of October 2016. We're going to get into a really quick stand-up. We've got a big agenda today, but see if we can bang through it fairly quickly. So first of all, Brian Hughes, have you done anything TSC related in the last 2 weeks?
Nothing new to report right now.
Colin Erig.
No, nothing TSC specific.
Jeremiah.
I don't remember anything TSC specific. I don't know who's next.
Josh Gavant. Josh. Yep. Actually, instead of doing it by name, is there anyone here? Oh, sorry, Josh, you're speaking.
That's okay.
You're breaking up a bit.
Go on. You're good.
Is there anyone here that's done anything specific to TSC work that they would like to report as a stand-up?
I guess the only thing I'd say is I added the issue to get LL Node moved over to the Node GitHub repo.
And if you can hear me, the GitHub bot is all settled up on the TSC stuff. Those items we were talking about last meetings.
Yes, we can hear you, and that's great. Okay, quick rundown of last.
Sorry, it's Tracy. I just wanted to give a heads up on the inclusivity proposal. I know y'all are still waiting on it. So it's not like it's gone. It's not like hiding and y'all haven't been shown it yet. It's still in progress, thanks to me being a bit behind after Node Interactive EU. But y'all will feel that soon. I was also waiting on talking to a consultant that was going to try and help me with some blind spots for advice, but just wanted to make sure y'all knew that it was still happening.
Okay. All right, so review of last meeting. So we did scope of responsibility stuff, the node defining node core. That's one that will hopefully get wrapped up soon, but not this week. Looked at the revised membership rules. We'll look at it again. We did request for foundation funds for Jeremiah to go to the ES modules meetings in TC39. We passed that, but we didn't end up spending it because Jeremiah didn't end up going. Switching default license from MIT to Apache version 2, that's still ongoing. Same with rollup reporting for active working groups and NVM to the foundation. Then we did some GitHub bot work. There was 2 issues there regarding permissions and required docs, and that's been organized. So GitHub bot has made progress. So we're going to get into it from the community travel fund. So I put this on the agenda. This is Michael's issue. Michael's simply requesting input from us regarding how much we should put on the budget. Given that we now have some momentum on requesting funds for travel, we might want to consider how much we could potentially spend in a year's worth of budget for 2017. So Michael, would you like to tell us a bit about the budgeting process?
Well, as it's in this item, essentially, like, we just need however much budget that you think that you're going to use, especially if you want to use any early on in 2017 without having to go back to the board. I don't think that if it's too low and you need more later, you can request that the board increases it. That's not a huge problem. The main thing is just that it takes at least a month usually to get the board to increase the funding. So if you want anything in January, February, we got to make sure that at least that amount of money is there. Oh, and one more thing. Any events that we do, like Code and Learn or Collab Summit and stuff like that, there's travel, like when we budget that particular thing that's just for collaborators, if we do them outside of an interactive, we can budget the funding for sending people within that. So this doesn't have to cover, all CTC travel for anything that the foundation ever does. Really, just the stuff that falls out of that.
Okay, so it's just additionals. Okay, honestly, I have no idea, but particularly since the two requests we have on the agenda today for spending actually would fall within the code and learn stuff. So the outside would be just miscellaneous, like TC39 attendance and not much else really that I can think of. So it probably shouldn't be a huge item. Maybe like if we're setting a cap on 1500, then maybe we should just put 10 trips in there. So it's like a 15,000 item.
I mean, another thing that we can do that it was originally set up to do is that, you know, if the TSC feels like somebody should represent the TSC and the foundation at an event, they can send that person there. It was originally set up for that, you know, so that, you know, if we want to send Rod or Jeremiah or, you know, just somebody to speak for the foundation at a community-run conference, that we have a fund to do that as well.
Yeah, I think there's a good reason it didn't work out though, because community-run conferences tend to pay for travel for people to attend, and we tend to not have the opportunity to pick to have someone represent us. It's more the conferences that do the choosing.
Yeah, I mean, like, if it's for speaking somewhere, then like the conference is going to choose, and almost certainly they're going to cover it, right? So.
Well, I will say we've had a couple of instances where even community conferences have reached out to us and said, like, we'd love to see someone speak at a conference. And I mean, that's a thing in itself that I think conferences should know, that they should be able to come to y'all, because that's who they want to hear speak. But also they tend to have limited funds. So for, you know, the option of the TSC being able to pay for that would be a really awesome thing. I don't want people to take advantage of that either. But I think I could do a better job of making sure that those groups know that they can do that. But I also want to make sure that people understand like how they're supposed to take, even TSC members are supposed to take advantage of that. And it isn't necessarily like a specific person. It's like, we want to hear really awesome people speak about these things that, like, you know, Core or TSC is doing.
There's also some events that are more industry-wide that don't cover travel that we may want Node to have representation at. You know, things like FOSDEM, or I dare say OSCON, or you know, just really big kind of open source conferences. We don't have a lot of Node representation there, and these conferences traditionally have not covered that. So if strategically the TSC wants to have people there, that could be good use of the fund.
Without getting too far into it, why was the $1,500 cap set?
Sorry?
I don't know, actually. I think it was just there because we wanted some kind of cap, and that seemed somewhat reasonable. In hindsight, it meant that it couldn't be really used for international travel. But I think also when we first set it up, one of the goals was to not do international travel with it, and mainly try to get people to conferences near them to try and build community. We're kind of using it for different stuff now, which makes international travel a lot more important. So the cap makes less sense.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about it too, like there are unfortunately far more events that happen in the U.S. than outside of the U.S. So I think then it ends up skewing more towards developers that live in America being able to attend American events. Or, I mean, I know that there are many conferences that happen in other countries, but that seems to be the case. And there's plenty of really awesome people who don't live in the U.S. who should be speaking. So.
Okay. Look, Michael, do you have a gut feel here for an amount that we should set? I really think you're in the best position to do this because, given past experience, I think we're skeptical that we'd use a whole lot of it, but be good to have it available.
Honestly, like I'm leaning towards setting it incredibly low, actually, setting it to something like 10,000, and then just have the CTC like blow it out. Like, I mean, like try to spend this money as quickly as you can, honestly, and then going back to the board and saying, hey, we need more money. Like, let's do an allocation. I think in general, the TSC just needs to get good at asking the board for money for things, and this is a good way to force it.
That's fine by me, I think. Particularly since you've said that Code and Learn and Collaborator Summits are separate. Anyone else have a problem with that? Better make sure we're proactive with requesting more money when we need it, just so we don't end up having to wait for a month.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, that's fine. Me too.
Okay, so Michael, we'll leave that to you.
Cool, I'll note it in my budget.
Okay, so we have two requests for funds for the same thing. So issue number 150 and issue number 145. So first, they're both to send individuals to Code and Learn at Node Interactive North America, Austin, in that's late November, or is it early November? In November, and it's for Anna Henningsen from Germany and Rich Trott from San Fran. So the only question I have here is the 1500 going to cover Anna?
Doesn't cover either of them, actually. They both need they both need more than that.
So is that because of accommodation?
Yeah. It's a pretty long amount of time. I think that the thinking with the 1500 was that, traditional conferences are 1 or 2 days, and that's about what the hotel and flight would be domestically. But because the conference is 2 days and then Code and Learn is 2 days, and there's all the stuff around it, it's just accommodations really stack up.
Okay, and so Richard said 1800 would cover his. Do we have a handle on how much it would cost for Anna?
I guess it will be around the same. I can't tell for sure. I actually would be fine with not staying at the hotel where it's supposed to happen, where the conference is. If that brings down the cost quite a bit, which I imagine it would. But yeah, like $1,800 to $2,000 might be okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Anna, for you, it's probably gonna be closer to 2,000 or 2,500, just because the flights from Austin to Austin are gonna be, I would imagine, a little pricier.
Yeah.
Yeah, the average flight is probably around like 1,800 at this point. So I would imagine that it's actually going to be up there. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's less than $3,000, does the TSC have any problem with it? I mean, honestly, like there's $45,000 that is currently unused in the budget, so you don't really need to be pinching pennies.
No, I just like if we're approving funds, do we need to be approving a certain amount of funds? So we probably should set an amount and say we up to this amount we approve.
Yeah, and somebody needs to go in and change the policy to say that 1,500 is no longer the cap.
I think we can probably agree on some kind of cap for this amount right now. So if Anna or Rich will need more, it should be fine. So what do you think?
Didn't we just implicitly agree on a cap of $3,000?
Michael suggested that, but
I literally made up that number. But I think that, like, you know, $3,000 and $2,000 for each of them respectively is probably fine, right?
Okay, I think I agree with it. So what do you think? Like the other from TSC?
yeah, great. I think as much as we need to spend to get people there and stay in the right place, it's good by me.
So in the case of other overages, if someone needs to request more for whatever reason, do we kind of need to have this discussion again to change the cap, or would it, or is there like some way for people to request above the cap? Like, is there a mechanism for that, or could we create a mechanism for that? Yeah, asking for an exemption basically from the cap.
I think that we should just remove that line from the policy, to be honest. Like, it's at the TSC's discretion. Like, nobody's going to get crazy with it. And we're not in danger of blowing out the budget. And if we do blow out the budget, we can go back to the board and get more money.
I agree. We can be reasonable within each item that comes up. We can just say, this is a reasonable amount within this limit. Yeah. No, I agree. We just remove that from the member travel fund document.
Yeah, and actually, since we're approving each request, anyways, there is like a review built in, so I think the danger of being abused is very low.
Agreed.
Is everyone else okay with that?
Yep, agreed.
Well, we'll do a pull request to remove that line item, so that can be, we can just approve that separately. But in terms of both of these requests, does anyone? Okay, let's, in terms of a vote, anyone here not or anyone not agree with a spend of up to 2,000 for Rich and up to 3,000 for Anna?
No objection.
And is there anyone abstaining from that vote? Okay, that is passed. Let me quickly make a note here in the doc. There we go. Great, easy. Next one. This is about moving LL Node into the org. I put this on the agenda just simply to sign it off. We've already implicitly agreed to this by saying here's the process. So it's had the docs done, and it's just simply us saying, yep, good to go. So any questions about this? Nope. Okay, so let's do the same vote again. Is there anyone that disagrees with moving LL Node into the org? Is anyone abstaining from that? Awesome.
I think I'm going to.
Okay. Jeremiah's abstaining. But so there's, I'm pretty sure that's a pass anyway. So make it so.
Actually, I have a question.
Okay.
So, yeah, I wanted to ask you, we seem to be agreed, well, we are going to discuss it, but we're discussing discussing moving to Apache license. So will it apply to this repo too, or is it just for the Node.js core itself?
That's simply the default license. So there's two questions there. There's whether Node Core should move to Apache in some way, and then there's whether we should change our default license for projects in the org to Apache 2. That's not been done yet, so we'll stick with MIT. If we want to change LL Node, like that's completely up to us or the maintainers of that repo in the future.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Also, we have an exception for a bunch of licenses if they move into the org after being started somewhere else. So pretty much any permissive license is fine. Like I think BSD, Apache, MIT, everything is fine. Because we don't want to force license changes when things move into the foundation. So we're good either way. We don't need to do a change.
Okay, that's great. It's MIT, so should not be a problem.
Yep. Good. Okay, next issue is 146. This is consider folding the TSC into the CTC. I put this on the agenda just to make sure we had coverage of people in this discussion. So make everyone aware of it, that this is being discussed and may happen. We don't necessarily have to do much discussion here or decide anything here. It's simply awareness. But is there anything pressing that anyone would like to say about this?
So there's one concern that I have, and this is actually a concern even in a few other contexts as well. So like we run into this problem a lot more if we do split agendas, like we split the administrative stuff out of, like we have one body together, but we split the administrative stuff into another meeting. We also have this problem if we start rotating meeting times, which is that if people object on the GitHub issue and then don't show up in the meeting because either they had a conflict because of the splitting of the agenda or because of the rotating time, they effectively hold up that for like another week. And then if they don't show up again, then like how do we just move on? We've already had this happen a few times, even with the normal meetings, where somebody had objected online and we tried to get them into a meeting and then it didn't happen. And they were the last objection and we just kind of moved on. I don't like that things can just get held up for 2 weeks because, and I also don't like that, you know, certain people may feel like they're being cut out because of, you know, the agenda being split off or the meeting shifting or whatever. So I don't have a good solution to this. I just think that the problem does get more compounded when we start splitting agenda or rotating meeting time.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree, but the way I can imagine this working is that the combined TSC could set up an administrative subcommittee that handles the same kind of stuff that we're dealing with here. So it just says, okay, for the purpose of administrative work, we're going to push that into a subcommittee that does that work and reports back to us. And then that subcommittee would do what we're doing here and in these meetings, and then report back to the whole TSC for anything that requires formal voting. But I can see the same sort of problem, which is that the TSC as a whole is going to need buy-in on any decisions made, and they're going to want to jump in on decisions that may be slightly controversial, and then we'll have to go through the discussion process again, and then we'll have that problem of people not being there or objecting. And it just because it's a subcommittee doesn't mean that it's going to be trusted or invested with the ability to pass things. So yeah, we do. It is. I think the issue is right in that the discussion is right in that the confusion is not helpful, and we haven't figured it out to the point where it makes any sense. So doing something about it is right, but being able to make administrative decisions effectively and efficiently is the biggest concern.
Yeah, I mean, isn't this kind of what we ran into before we split off?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're just pretty much going back and giving ourselves like the same problems, aren't we? I don't know. I don't really feel so good about doing this, but like I definitely think that like if we've decided like what our mission is, that we should try to expand like the TSC in that way. So that might mean pulling in more CTC members or whatever. But I think like having it combined will become really weird for like funding or anything that like the board requires us to kind of have like a formal vote on, and
yeah,
I don't think it will be very productive.
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off of that, I think that's a good point. As a thought experiment, we had these funding votes for travel. What would that look like? In this new world where there's a single entity with a subcommittee. Would the full CTC or new TSC need to vote on those issues? And does it make sense to have them do so?
I mean, like the option is like if we invite someone to the CTC or TSC, we like invite them to both. And then if they're like, well, I don't really want to deal with like administrative issues, they don't come onto the TSC, and if they're like, I don't really want to deal with technical issues, they don't go onto the CTC, or they go into both. You know.
No, I'm thinking more along those lines as well. That it's almost like an open door policy across both. That people that will self-select, and we have some sort of mechanism where they can move at points in time, not just anytime they want, but maybe we have a process where they can say, okay, I've been doing the CTC thing for a while. I'd like to start getting involved in TSC. I'll put up my hand, and we have just a vote to quickly move them on, but it's an expectation that if they put up their hand, then they get to come on. But we also need the reverse where, okay, you've been on the TSC list, you've not attended any meetings. Can you, let's do a removal as well. So make it so that the CTC individuals can be just as involved, but only those that are actually going to show up and be interested in doing that work. But I think I raised this in another issue, which is the charter one, which is having a way to connect the two groups much more closely so they don't diverge, and that would solve it, I think.
You could combine what you talked about before in terms of making it a subcommittee, but a subcommittee authorized to make the decision, and then do what you just discussed with if people are interested, they can move on to it, but you basically have it so that subgroup is authorized to take the vote as opposed to having to get the whole CTC involved.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to structure it, right? Like if you do the subgroup thing, you can say, look, we're delegating a lot of responsibility here. I think that for some of this stuff though, like some of these issues certain members want to pop into and out of, and having it be this kind of formalized subgroup makes it difficult for them to do that. And in some cases, we actually do want that input. Another way to structure it would be to say, look, there's just one group, it's called the TSC. They make all of the core administrative decisions, and you just take the agenda items for technical stuff and you put it in one meeting, and you put the administrative stuff in another meeting, and you basically say, like, you've got to be in the meeting to make final decisions if they bubble up to that level. And you don't have quorum rules that relate to the entire TSC at that point. You just say, look, like, this is when we make final decisions. You're either there or you're not.
How do we work that with like rotating meeting times and meeting times for people that aren't in our general time zones that people are currently in?
Yeah, I mean that's the problem, right?
I think we can separate that problem out and let the CTC experiment with rotating meeting times for a little while and see how that goes, and make a call on that, because perhaps it doesn't actually make sense. Perhaps the experience will tell us this is making us worse at making decisions.
The other approach is also that you might try handling, you could say that you either have to vote through the issue in advance or be at the meeting, and it's going to be a quorum of the people who have voted at the meeting and in advance. So you're not excluding those people who want to vote, but they have to actually do it. If they're not going to show up to the meeting, they have to do it,
So far, I've seen that work about half of the time. Like about half of the time, like people will vote in the issue or address something in the issue, and then even if they don't make it to the meeting, that's essentially the way that it goes. But half the time, it goes the other way, and then there's a consensus on the call that we should move in this direction, but there are lagging votes against that aren't in the meeting, and then you just can't move forward, and the issue is stuck. That's I think the thing that we're worried about happening.
Right. So you're saying it's the no votes.
Yeah.
And then show up to the meeting, right?
Yeah, and because we can't undermine too much our consensus-seeking approach. And if somebody is voting no, we need to respect that and have that discussion and see if we can find some way of moving forward.
Well, I mean, like for example, like all the
you have to announce that you're going to make a vote if you're not going to count on quorum rules, because otherwise, if 3 people show up in a meeting and everybody else at a conference, they can, theoretically at least, make every decision that comes up in your mind, right? So I don't really think you can get rid of the quorum rules unless you set different rules on like when a vote should be proposed, so people have the time to prepare and maybe show up or vote in advance.
Well, yeah, you'd have to have the issue open like a week in advance, so people could vote yes or no. That in the meeting, you can finalize the vote. And I think, to Rod's point, if somebody votes no, well, maybe we do have to wait a week, right? If they can't make it because the meeting's at 3 a.m.
So, I mean, that's what we've been doing so far, and I think that the few times that it's happened, it's not a big deal to wait, an extra week. And in fact, we've even had, like, I remember being on an issue where, like, it got held up a week, and then the person wasn't in the next meeting either, so we just moved forward with it, right? So informally, that's kind of how we're dealing with this. The one problem that we run into with rotating meeting times and split agendas is that people get in the habit of not attending half of the meetings, and so we're gonna, like, the informal consensus is going to be to continue to keep trying to delay things to get them into a meeting, because it's more reasonable to assume that they're not there. Whereas, like, right now, if you're not into CTC meetings and you have an outstanding objection, like, okay, whatever, like, we're moving past it. But I can see that getting relaxed as we get projected out. Maybe we're overthinking this a bit, though. Like, maybe it's actually going to move a lot more smoothly and this will happen more rarely, but I could just see it becoming a problem.
Yeah, I mean, what I would hope we would do whenever there are people raising objections and issues and we're going to go to a vote in a meeting is that we'd reach out to, those individuals ahead of time saying, like, hey, we really need a vote on this in this one specific meeting. Can you make it? And maybe, making some accommodations to make sure that they can get in there, get into the meeting. If this is an important voice who's been, objecting or has concerns in GitHub itself. And if someone's going to have to miss 2 meetings in a row, and they're an important part of the conversation, maybe that would be a good time to say, okay, we're going to break the normal schedule of how we rotate meeting times because of this one instance. We can always kind of be flexible in that regard too.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I definitely lean on, like, let's see if it's a problem, and if it's not a problem, great. If it is, then yeah, we'll have to work around it as opposed to finding some way to not have that vote.
Yeah, and I mean, just for the record, like, even with all of these problems, I would still probably prefer a split agenda rather than a split membership and not creating another subcommittee, just because I do think that having people be able to float in and out of the administrative stuff based on their interest is a little bit better than requiring people to make a huge upfront commitment to all of the administrative issues. So.
Sorry. Well, what was the preference there? Not having a subcommittee, but
yeah, just splitting the
agenda.
Yeah. So have one large membership and just split the agenda.
But I think you still need something where you don't need a quorum. You don't need everybody to have voted. You just need enough of the people to have voted and nobody to have objected.
Yeah. I think that, like, we shouldn't write down an official quorum rule, but we'll get into the habit of, this is how many people are usually here. And especially because we have the amount of time before it where people are discussing the issue. When people are clearly engaged in the issue and normally in a meeting and they missed it or something, we'll know to come back to it or try to get more of their input or whatever.
Yeah, I think if something's coming up for a vote, we need to be more. We'll end up needing to be more strict about the lead time for announcing that. Like I put that stuff on the agenda for voting for the travel stuff. I put that on less than 24 hours for this meeting. It was like I think it was less than 12 hours ago. I tagged them as the agenda, and I posted the agenda even that little time ago. And that wouldn't be acceptable if we have a larger membership where people can opt in and out of voting. It would have to be a longer lead time where they have time to look at it and engage, similar to the way we have the rules for reviewing patches into core. There has to be enough time for people to have seen them and object. You can't just slip things by quickly. So that would have to be more formalized.
Yeah, I like the idea of codifying that, similar to pull requests. I mean, we can even kind of view it as being, analogous to a pull request in a lot of ways. Something we could also look into in the future is, once we have these rules for, like, issues have to be posted so far in advance and things, if we still have an issue with, just getting a quorum, we'd also consider maybe some mechanism of saying that, if you haven't voiced an opinion inside of the issue and you don't show up to the meeting, basically, a person has been completely silent on the issue, then maybe that automatically gets counted as an abstaining vote or something. Provided that, like, there's plenty of lead time and people are aware and other things. If it becomes an issue, and maybe it won't. Maybe we are overthinking it.
Well, but no, I think you do need. I think there is I think you need a mechanism whereby the people who weren't interested in the administrative side don't have to necessarily vote every time, or I don't know.
This works both ways as well. And here's another problem, which is that there has been some, like I'm keen on expanding the TSC and making it fairly big. I'm happy for it to be a big body. I think that's healthy, even if it does make things difficult to make progress. I think the more different kinds of opinions we have in there, the better. But if we're combining TSC and CTC, then we're also expanding the type of people that go on. And if we did move ahead with this, I'd probably want to nominate William and Josh as well to be on that combined group. And then we've also got Brian here as well. So that's 3 additional people that that I would hope would get into that combined group. It's a very large group. There might be objections to simply expanding the group. There have been objections before when I've suggested individuals, aren't we getting too big? So we'd have to be comfortable with adding individuals that are not necessarily technically deeply involved to the combined group, and we'd have to also be comfortable with that decision-making process of if you don't show up to the meeting, you're not involved in the discussion, or if you don't express an interest, then you're not involved in voting. That would have to go the other way as well. So individuals that want to mainly focus on the administrative stuff basically opt out of the technical stuff, and that doesn't really affect quorum rules in some way. So it would work both ways.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. But the size thing I see as a potential problem for moving forward here, because there's actually a couple more individuals that would be ideal for the CTC as well that I wouldn't mind proposing.
Oh, I mean, I think that the CTC has actually done a very good job of expanding membership in terms of like pulling in other skill sets that around core. So I think, expanding the charter some more to take on the TSC administrative stuff will probably go over well now that that's kind of within their charter. Also, just keep in mind that we're still going to have the TSC repo, and most of the administrative stuff will happen there. So there's still a very easy way for all members to sort of segment the information that they're participating in by the 2 repos. So.
Okay, so we don't have to make a decision here. We can take this discussion back to GitHub, and I've put it on the CTC agenda as well for discussion over there. I'm not going to be at that meeting, I don't think, because it's a 3 a.m. one for me next week. But yeah, I think maybe what we should do as well is open up invitation for our TSC specific friends here to join the CTC meeting to discuss this as well. I'll talk to Rich about that actually. Any final words on this before we move on? Okay, let's move on then. The next one, James, the revised membership rules. There was a little bit of movement on this one. Where are we at?
To be honest, with all the travel past 4 weeks for me, I'm so far behind I don't know.
Yeah.
So I haven't had a chance to catch up.
So to be honest, it's actually the same. That's the same sort of response for the next few items, which is NVM default license and regular rollup reporting. Those are equally in a state of hold. The other one was the. Oh, I've skipped forward here. I've missed a whole agenda item. The scope of responsibility for the TSC item is the same one, but I did make a little bit of progress on that. That is, let's try and get that wrapped up fairly soon. I'll get back into GitHub and respond to those comments there and see if we can make it acceptable for merging, and then maybe next week we can actually have a vote on that. So please engage in that one. That's issue number 144. So just skipping through the items, if there's anything that you want to say, first of all, just speak up. But so the issue number 142, James has issued the revised membership rules. Is there any comments on that before we move on? No. The NVM one, which is still in a holding pattern, number 96. Default license. Michael, I don't think we have a response from legal committee about that, do we?
No, I mean, it went to the board, but now it's got to go back to the legal committee.
Yeah.
Even when it does, I would not expect an immediate response.
No, that's fine. We just need to make sure that people are aware of where it's up to.
Well, I mean, the current status is that our default license is MIT. Documentation, the default is a CC license, but I mean, that's the state of things at the moment. Coming back to the NVM thing real quick, I actually had a conversation with Jordan about this at TC39, and I think that the issue's really stalled out because it's trying to talk about a few different things. I think that we should probably break up the issue into a couple things that we can make firmer decisions on. Like, for one thing, like, can we all agree that the Node project proper should take on responsibility for version managing Node? And once we say that, then we can say, okay, well, there's this version manager that many people use. We should probably take some responsibility for it, even if it's not perfect, and take that in, and potentially take in other ones if we need to, or whatever. Like taking responsibility for this problem is going to be relatively large. But yeah, I would like to see that start to move forward because a lot of people are kind of just waiting on it right now.
Yeah, I think what we can do then is this the pull request at 144, which is the scope of responsibility. If we get that merged, then a change to that would be somebody putting a pull request in saying, we think that the scope should include this thing, the version managing thing, and then we can discuss that as a separate issue.
So we've been moving a few things gradually in LL Node. We're thinking about Node Report. There was one that came up in the diagnostics working group yesterday, Node Inspect. Should we consider like a Node.js -experiments or something like that org where we can put projects that they're not really officially supported by us yet, but we're kind of incubating them? Like, for example, the reason why I'm thinking about it is MVM. Like, we've been experimenting a little bit internally here at Microsoft on something that could support Windows and Linux and maybe handle different engines and things like that. So maybe we put it in the same place so we can compare and things like that. I'm not sure, but I'm saying maybe we should consider an experiments area.
Well, one problem that I have with that is that we already have repos in the main org that are our experiments and are not officially supported. And so I wouldn't want to give the impression that now all of those are actually supported because we have this other unsupported org. Like, for instance, we do not actually support Node Chakra like as an official thing yet. But there is a repo of people working really diligently to make that happen. I mean, I'm okay with just creating new repos and just saying, like, put in the README that it's experimental and unsupported, and that's fine. If the best place to start it is like within the project, I think that we should be liberal about that.
Okay. Jordan, you joined.
Jordan asked a question in the sidebar. I think he unmuted for a bit, but it was quite noisy in the background. So.
Okay. Holding pattern.
Yeah, hey. So I'm basically just trying to figure out if there's any action items for me at this point, or if I'm just waiting, or specifically what things I'm waiting
on. So the two things that are holding this up is one, getting the scope thing sorted out, and the other is additional movements in the open source foundation space that may impact this, that we can't talk about publicly yet. But I think after that, after we get that PR merged and there's a more public announcement, sorry to be cryptic, that it will become much more clear what we're going to do here. We'll be able to say, yes, this belongs here, or no, we're not comfortable with it, or it belongs somewhere else. So there's no actions on your side that need to be taken, I don't think, Jordan. So it's totally on us. Sorry.
As far as that thing that we can't talk about being announced, that's like 2 weeks out. So
Right. Yep. It got deferred, didn't it? To yeah. That's fine then. So that it'll come soon. We'll make progress, and yeah, we apologize, Jordan. It's been holding. And yeah, the link to the PR, it's issue number 96. There we go. Okay. So moving on for other comment. Switching default license, we covered that, and regular rollup reporting, we'll get there as well. But are there any comments about that? Nope. Okay, let's head into a public Q&A time. We've got a few minutes left. So if you're listening to the live stream and you have questions or comments for us, please drop them in YouTube chat or the issue in the TSC repo for this meeting, or on IRC, where you can find most of us. We will pause for a minute or so while we catch up with the stream.
Someone's already preemptively asked, hi, I would like to know what are the core principles for open source projects Node.js Foundation could provide as a reference for smaller teams / projects. I think we have a list of some of this stuff on the website.
yeah, we basically have like a default governance process that's like much lighter weight than the one that we actually use, but basically has all the same principles embedded in it. And I wrote like a giant Medium post that was very detailed about like why each of those steps and that kind of stuff. That's what Express. That's also what Express adopted, and Express is now at the point where they're starting to iterate on it as well.
Governance documents.
Right. The post Michael was talking about is on Michael Rogers' Medium. I'm not sure exactly what that Medium account is, but I can at least put his Twitter in the YouTube bar.
It's called Healthy Open Source. And then if you're looking for the governance docs, they're in the TSC repository in the Node.js org. There's a directory in there of policies, and I think it's just called contributing, right? Contributing.md.
Possibly. Or governance.md. More likely, I think.
I think it's actually contributing. I'm not sure. Let me look.
Someone else asked, hi, what would be the license changes you were talking about before?
So that's simply we're looking at changing our default as specified in our policies for new projects spinning up inside the Node.js org. We're looking at changing that from the MIT license to Apache 2. We're waiting for explicit feedback from our legal committee about that, but the understanding on our end is that Apache 2 puts us in a better position to protect against patent claims, against contributions and usage of code in our repository. So Apache 2.0 is the license we're looking at moving our default to, but we need the license, the legal committee to be clear about that. It's also possible that the Node.js project may be in for a license change, but given the difficulty of that, I don't imagine that'll be anytime soon, and the outcome of that might not look so straightforward. It could be dual licensed in some way where new code is under one license and old code is under another license, but that's like there'll be plenty of heads up for that if it does happen at all.
We're all convinced that we should go through that headache of relicensing?
No. We're not at all. That's the thing, that we're not, for a start, we're not actually convinced that Apache 2 is the right way to go, even though we've heard signals that it is. So we just need confirmation that yes, this is a better license for covering us. And two, we're not convinced about the way forward with Node. We are concerned about the pattern problem with Node, and that we're not covering. That's why we had the discussion about the CCLA, the Corporate Contributor License Agreement. And Apache 2 may be a way of solving that, but exactly how to pull it off and whether the pain of doing that is worth it is totally up for discussion, and I suspect will be a very difficult discussion. So it's totally on the table, not yet formally being considered, just there.
Makes sense. So we're waiting for the recommendation from the legal committee, and then we can make our decision.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a thanks for explaining, but no other questions.
Okay. And I don't believe we've got anything in the issue. No, we don't. Okay, so let's wrap this up then. The next meeting is in 2 weeks, assuming that we don't have some radical dissolution of this body in between that time, but I doubt it. So that would be the 20th of October. Thanks for everyone for joining us and listening in on the live stream.
All right.
That's right.
Later. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Call recording